Good morning, everyone. Today's class, we have it on nephrotic syndrome. I think in the last class we have discussed about the different nephritic syndromes and the types of nephritic syndromes. So today we will talk about the nephrotic syndrome. And in the previous class I have discussed in detail about the differences between nephritic and nephrotic, which is an exam question for you people, and you have to be very thorough in that. Now, let's talk about what is nephrotic syndrome. It is a clinical complex characterized by a number of renal and extrarenal features, most prominent of which are proteinuria, hypoalbuminuria, edema, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, lipiduria, and hypercoagulability. Now let's see why there are so many syndromes in nephrotic syndrome. Because in nephritic we saw what is the major condition which you see in nephritic syndrome? It was hematuria. Proteinuria was not as much as compared to the hematuria. So what happens in nephrotic syndrome is, because we are losing protein in the urine, there is a reduced amount of albumin in the blood. So that is why hypoalbuminemia. Now when there is a reduced albumin, it leads to reduced oncotic pressure. Reduced oncotic pressure, the fluid from the circulation will go into the surrounding tissues, which results in edema. Okay. Now when there is an edema, of course there is a less amount of volume, blood volume inside the circulation, which will help the release of renin, angiotensin or aldosterone. So with the result, when these hormones are released in the circulation, it will lead to hypertension. Now, because of the increased amount of protein which the liver is supposed to produce, because the protein is already getting lost in the urine, so there's an increased amount of protein synthesis, and then there's an increased amount of lipid lipoproteins which are being produced by the liver. With the result, there is a hyperlipidemia, lipiduria, and of course the coagulation factors which are produced by the liver are also affected, so they are increased in number, so there is a hypercoagulability. Now you can see, just because of losing protein in the urine, it can lead to so many diseases and so many syndromes. Now let's talk about the classification. Classification is primarily and secondary. Primary is when the disease is specific to the kidneys. Secondary, when the renal manifestation is because of some systemic diseases. It is not that the renal are the primary cause of the disease. Now let's talk about the primary causes. Number one is the minimal change disease, FSGS. So minimal change and FSGS will be like related to each other. Then we have the membranous nephropathy and mesengeroproliferative glomerulonephritis. And then we have a RPGN, which is also known as rapidly progressive glomerulonephritis. So we will be talking about all these 5 diseases a little bit in detail, so that you understand what are they, what are the causes, what is the pathology that you see in the kidneys, and what do you see on IF, and what do you see it on electron microscopy. So these are really important, and these are really exam questions also, and even for your entrance for MD and MS, these questions are very frequently asked. So the secondary causes, which includes diabetes mellitus, SLE, amyloidosis, some viral infections, hepatitis B and C, and preeclampsia. So these are the causes which I'm going to discuss in my next class. Okay. So today we will be focusing mainly on the primary causes. So what are the metabolic consequences of proteinuria? This I have already discussed with you. So let's go to the minimal change. It is the most common cause of nephrotic syndrome in children. You should know that. Even in the MCQs, if it comes, which is the most common cause of nephrotic syndrome in children is minimal change disease. And these are more common in boys in children. They have a reoccurrence rate, so it keep coming on and off, and it responds well to treatment, but only very rarely it goes towards chronic renal failure, and in some cases it has been shown as associations with the Hodgkin's lymphoma. So what is the etiology of it? Etiology means there's a loss of negative charge on the capillary basement membrane. Now in one thing it is very important, there is normal HNE, there will be no changes IF also there will be negative, but on electron microscopy you can see the loss of the food processes. Now if you see this, the above one is the normal glomeruli and you can see the separate food processes, but if you see the lower one, the lower diagram, you can see there's a fusion of the food processes and there is a loss of the food processes. So this is the only electron microscopy changes which are seen in the minimal change disease. Clinical features, I don't have to say, nephrotic syndrome, rule out some upper respiratory tract infection or a Hodgkin's lymphoma, and lab features is selective proteinuria. When you say it is selective, you will lose either specifically albumin or one specific protein in the urine. So spontaneous remission, as I've told you, is common. Complete remission is also common, and these are sensitive to steroid therapy. The moment you give them steroids, the patient recovers, but sometimes they become resistant, and when the patient is resistant, it progresses to FSGS, which is known as focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. This we have to discuss the differences between both of them in detail, but first we will see what is FSGS. FSGS can occur at any age. It can be because of the number of reasons. Okay, so it can see in IgA nephropathy, I'll talk about it. Alport syndrome, there's a deficiency of one typical protein on the membrane of the capillary loops of the glomeruli. Vasculitis, sickle cell disease, heroin use, HIV, and the 50% have impaired renal function. Okay, so the thing is, the FSGS do not respond to corticosteroids, so they will invariably progress to end-stage kidney disease, and the risk of reoccurrence in the post-transplantation is also 20 to 30%. So this is how you differentiate. And minimal change disease will always be in younger patients, so these will be like middle age most commonly, but it can occur at any age. So on the light microscopy, you will see some changes which you did not see in the minimal change disease. So they call it as a focal. I have discussed in the last class that less than 50% of the glomeruli, if there are 10 glomeruli in one of the biopsies, you will be able to see 50% of the glomeruli involved segmental, a part of the glomerulus. In all these 5 glomeruli which are involved, only a part of it is involved. It does not involve all of the glomeruli. So that is known as focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. So now they have a non-selective proteinuria, you should know. It is not a selective proteinuria as you see in the minimal change disease, and it progresses more commonly to the chronic renal failure and responds very poor response to the corticosteroid therapy. Now if you see this, there is a proliferation of the visceral epithelial cells and there is a collagenous sclerosis on the mesangial cells in the focal and segmental areas. Now if you see this, again this is a epithelial hyperplasia, and you can see there is a segmental capillary loss and there is an increase in the mesangial proliferation. Now in this also you can see there's a mesangial proliferation, and the segmental sclerosis has become bigger in this particular slide. So how do you differentiate selective proteinuria in minimal change disease, non-selective proteinuria? Then minimal changes, there's no hematuria. In FSGS you will see some amount of hematuria in addition to the proteinuria. And in minimal change disease, there's a less chance of progression to chronic glomerulonephritis, but in FSGS there is a high rate of progression. And steroids, they are responsive. But in FSGS, there is a poor response to steroids. Now let's see who is this man. This man was a baseball player who was Alonzo Harding Mooring, and he had developed this focal FSGS, and then he got a kidney transplant, and after that he won the championship in US. So you can see that it is still possible to achieve anything in life. Now let's talk about IgA nephropathy. This is more common. Most commonly it is seen in the adult, and it is a cause of a nephritic syndrome. And you can also see both. You can see nephritic and nephrotic both. And it is most commonly lead to the transplantation at stage kidney disease. So you have to treat the patient, follow up of the patient. So if you remember dermatitis herpetiformicus, that is again IgA disease, in which the lesions are seen in the skin. And then we have a celiac disease, which is a disease which is seen in the GIT. So all these things, they leads to IgA diseases. But on the microscopy in the kidney, you can see that there is an increase in the mesangial proliferation. So this slide is a better clear picture. So mesangial hypercellularity and the increased matrix in the upper part, and then we have formation of a crescent. Can you see? On the right side of the glomerular, there is a normal glomeruli. On the left side, towards the parietal epithelial cells, there is a proliferation, and which is known as a crescentic formation. And you can see the granular deposits, the mesangial deposits are seen in IgA nephropathy. So you can see, you always see the granular mesangial deposits in IgA nephropathy and mesangial hyperproliferation. I'm sure you remember there are three types of depositions. One is the epithelium outside the capillary, then inside the capillary loop, all right, and then we have the endothelial, the lines, the cells which are seen inside the capillary loop. So there are three types of depositions, and then fourth one is the mesangial deposition. So this is a part of the mesangial deposition. So let's talk about membranous glomerulonephritis. It constitutes about 20 to 30% of nephrotic syndrome in adults, and most commonly seen with autoimmune diseases, drugs, infections, and leads to they carry a risk of the chronic renal failure. So if you just try to remove the cause, obviously you will be able to cure the patient. Now on the electron microscopy and on the HNE, you can see the spikes. These are known as spikes, if you can see. Now if you see the spikes outside, where is the deposition? It is subepithelium, because it is outside the capillary loop. So you see a subepithelial spikes in case of membranous glomerulonephritis. So they are composed of IgG and C3 along the basement membrane. And now if you see the electron microscopy, you can see around the outside the capillary loop there are big depositions of IgG and C3. These are electron dense immune deposits, and these are typical spikes which you see it on the electron microscopy. Now this is again done with a special stains known as Jonas stain, but on the normal HNE you will be able to see only the thickening of the capillary loops. You will not be able to see the spikes on a normal HNE slide. Alright, so IF, you will be able to see the spike-like appearance on the capillary walls in the subepithelium. Now let's talk about the membranous proliferative glomerulonephritis. Again, the association is with the chronic infections, SLE, cancer, cirrhosis, heroin abuse, and they have a wide range of involvement, but most commonly in children and young adults. And the pathology is the diffuse proliferation of the glomerular capillary walls. Okay, so those capillary walls, they are actually thickened. So they are so thickened that there will be a splitting of the capillary loop, okay, and which will lead to a tram track appearance. I will go to the next slide. Now you can see in the capillary loops there are two capillary walls. You can see the tram track appearance. So there's a duplication or a reduplication of the glomerular basement membrane. So in this picture we have the mesangial proliferation, increased matrix, endocapillary proliferation, mesangial and duplication, and the replication of the GBM. So this is how it presents. Now you see, if you have a spikes, it is membranous. If it is tram tracking, it is a membranoproliferative diseases. Now based on the deposition of those deposits, it is divided into three types, 1, 2 and 3. One is subendothelial, 2 is in the basement membrane, and third is a subendothelium. So in the electron microscopy we have these deposits which are seen in the subepithelium, and the mesangial deposits, and in the intracapillary thrombi. Clinically, it's most commonly present itself as a nephrotic syndrome, but can be seen as a nephritic in few percentage of the cases. So please rule out the history of the upper respiratory tract infection, hypertension, and renal insufficiency. And in the lab you will see the decreased C3 factor, because again the complement is getting used to it. But these patients, there's a progressive deterioration of the renal function. So in some of the cases, there is one known as a Hayman's nephritis. If you go to the Robbins, the Hayman's nephritis is also one of the cause in which there is an antibody against that Hayman antigen which is present in the basement membrane. So these are other some genetic factors which are main causes of glomerulonephritis. I'm so sorry about the noise. Now, next is the rapidly proliferating glomerulonephritis. In the rapidly proliferating, it is most commonly, you can see the crescents. Okay, so remember that rapidly proliferating means crescents, and there is a flea-bitten kidney. Now, in the exam question, they will ask you what are the different conditions in which you see the flea-bitten kidney. The first one is the RPGN, then hypertension, then the chronic glomerulonephritis. So these are the three conditions which you have to talk. Now, in the rapidly progressive, there are three types. The antibodies, there are three different types. Very important to remember. Type 1 is when there is a anti-GBM antibody which is present against the special antigen in the kidney, okay, in the glomeruli. Now this antibody confuses and it goes and acts against the same antigen in the lungs also, as we have seen in Goodpasture syndrome. So these patients will come up with the renal failure and the hemoptysis in the GBM disease. Okay, this is known as Goodpasture syndrome. Now there is a deposition of only antibody against the antigen which is already present inside the glomeruli. This is a type 1 RPGN. Now type 2 RPGN is when there is an immune complex inside the circulation and this goes and gets deposited inside the glomeruli. Now type 3 is when there is no immune complex but there are some ANCA associated antibodies which are circulating and they go and act against the kidney. Okay, so this is one table which is given inside the Robbins. I think you should be able to read about it and get your doubts. If it is there, you can get it cleared and then you can get back to me if there is anything else you want to understand. Now this is the flea-bitten kidney and this is within the glomeruli. Crescents are seen. You can see the blue ones are the crescents which are being seen here, and yeah, you can see that, and I am not able to see the PPT here. Okay. So basically, this was the last disease, RPGN, which we were talking about. So you can see the crescents, which are, proliferation, which are lying next to the crescents. And then we have the chronic glomerulonephritis. They are kidney disorders and chronic diseases. It can be, result in both nephritic and nephrotic syndrome. So the patient will usually present with hypertension, proteinuria, edema, azotemia, and uremic frost. And again you will be able to see the contracted granular kidney, and then we have the diffuse kidney, we have the cortical atrophy, and you see the glomeruli, they are completely sclerosed. Okay, so so acute GN will get into chronic GN and will get into chronic kidney failure. So this is how the prognosis go about. So now I think you should be able to talk about different types of nephritic and nephrotic syndrome. Classification is very, very important. Go through the Robbins, and what is most important is the light microscopy, and then the IF, and then electron microscopy of all the diseases. So go through them, and we have a lot of specimens here, and then we will be able to show you some slides to clear your doubts. So please read well. And this is Dr. Amrit, your radio jockey. As always, I do not know whether you're able to understand or not, but wish you all the best and get back to me with all your doubts. Thank you once again, and bye.